Hello and welcome to, oh gosh, another gaming channel. In this video, I'll be going through benchmark results for F123 and looking at CPU and GPU bottlenecks at various resolutions and detail settings. As explained in my previous video, I'm trying to interpolate a wide range of GPUs by underclocking or power limiting the ones that I own. And on the CPU side, I am turning off and downclocking cores in the BIOS to simulate lower tier CPUs. So not perfect, but I hope this is acceptable to you, or else I'd have to buy quite a lot of hardware to do all of this. One change that I have made here in this video from the previous is that I replaced the 4090 power limited to 40% with a 45% power limit because I was finding that the 40% was just often coming too close to the 7800 XT. And I'll mention again that no ray tracing or upscaling was used in this testing. In the next sections, I'll be discussing what the results at each resolution are, but if you just don't care what I have to say, I want to just go quickly to a specific resolution and graphics detail preset and interpret for yourself. At the end of this video, I've made a bunch of 5-second chapters for each chart, so you can just go jump to the numbers you care about and pause the video and see for yourself. And with that, let's get this started. So first we have the 1080p numbers. One thing I'll mention right away is that at 1080p and 1440p, when using the higher tier, mid-tier, and higher tier GPUs, the frame rates did not necessarily drop progressively as you would expect when going from ultra low to medium. You'll see that there are some cases where as you increase the graphic preset, the frame rates actually increased. So we tested that a bunch of times, and those are the numbers. I don't have an explanation. If you do, please leave in the comments. But yeah, those are not typos by me. That's what I was getting. So first, we have the ultra-low 1080p figures. This game definitely enables one to play at very high frame rates if they wish, and they have a high refresh rate monitor. And you don't even need very good hardware. And now when it comes to GPU, CPU bottlenecking, starting from the bottom, we see the bottom tier settings here. We see a fair amount of CPU dependency. It only takes up to the 4090 20% without a 350 400 tier card, maybe a little less. Pricing keeps changing. At that point, you're already looking at needing a 13400 to get the most out of it. As you go above that, it's about 1-to-1. As you move up a tier in GPU, you're going to need to go up a tier in CPU. But interestingly, for this test, once I got to the 7800 XT with an i7, that was pretty much the highest frame rate we saw. So next, if we bump up the settings to low, as I mentioned, oddly, for the higher tier products, GPUs, we see higher frame rates here. Here again, we start to need the i5 13400 with the RTX 4090 at 20%. Not a huge gain, but it's a little bit of a gain. And then after that, the 7800 XT at 75%, so kind of a 7700 XT. Then you're looking at an i7. From there, we do see a gain if you go up one level in GPU to 7800 XT. Again, that's kind of the most we can get still at these settings. Maybe we're getting a little beyond margin of error if you look at the top two GPU tiers with an i9. Maybe it's a little above margin of error there, but percentage-wise, we're not talking about that much more in frame rates if we go up any higher than as I said, 7800 XT and the i7. Now to medium, the frame rates, as you see, again increased, but the conclusions we see aren't too different. Here, though, 4090 at 20% is no longer CPU bound. Don't need an i5 for that anymore. But once you move one up tier above that, actually we go all the way back to the wanting the 13600K to pair with it. And now, interestingly though, at these medium settings, we see that while the 7800 XT is still pretty much showing the max frame rates we can get possible in my testing, it now is benefiting from an i9. So first time we've seen the i9 matter in this video so far. And if we keep tuning up the details now to high, now we're starting to see the higher tier GPUs start to matter, and now can go all the way up to the 7800 XT before we need the 13400. Then it kind of steps up 1-to-1 up to a 4090 at 50%. So you're going to need that 4080, 7900 XTX, that about 1000 tier GPU to get the maximum refresh rate at these high settings. And we do again see that the i9 is a benefit at high settings. Now the ultra high, now we really get to see that, things be GPU bound. So you have to go all the way up to $1,000 CPU before the i3 isn't enough, but the 4090 actually sees benefits all the way up to an i7. That's it for the 1080p results. So we move on to 1440p. Again, going back down, starting with the ultra low again, going from the bottom up, we are GPU limited until you get to the 7800 XT at 75%. And then definitely a decent benefit going up to the 13400. And again, it's kind of nice to keep seeing this kind of one-to-one progression with moving up a GPU tier benefits from going up a CPU tier along with it. And so we keep seeing benefits all the way up to the i9 with a 4090 at 50%. And then full-fledged 4090 isn't seeing any benefit over that. It must be, CPU bound. Now we go up to low. Here, things are a little different. We saw the GPU bound end at the 7800 XT at 75%. But then instead of just going to the 13600 with the full 7800 XT, we actually see benefits from jumping up 2 CPU tiers. But then after that, we don't see much of a benefit to the 4090 at 45%. The lower resolutions and the lower graphics details we actually saw, you might have noticed in the previous slides that the 7800 XT was actually beating the 45% 4090. But then the 4090 at 50% is faster. Yeah, here, $1,000 tier GPU with an i7 is where we're seeing the best frame rates. Doesn't get any better after that. So at medium settings, we see things become a little more GPU limited. Now an i3 isn't holding the GPU back until you get to the 7800 XT, at which point just a 13400 is sufficient. From there, we do start to see benefits of stepping up the CPU some more. So 4090 to 45% sees a benefit from definitely the 13600K, probably not the i7, definitely with a margin of error. Then the 4090 at 50%, and the full 4090 there, definitely see a benefit from the i7, and maybe also, some benefit there if you bump up to the i9. Now at high, as you expect, we continue to see become more GPU limited. Now the i3 holds its own all the way up to the 4090 at 45%. And here, as mentioned earlier, the 45% 4090 might have been losing at the lower settings to the 7800 XT, but now as we keep bumping things up, the tiering I was going for starts to fall into place a little better. So, like I was saying, the i3 really holds its own all the way up to there, so you have to get to that $1,000 GPU tier before the 13400 becomes necessary. But then, interestingly, so now finally the 4090 really can stretch its legs, and it actually then sees benefits all the way up to the i9. So even though the 4090 at 50% just needed the 13400, the full-fledged 4090 sees benefits going all the way up to the i9. So thought that was interesting. And then lastly, we have the ultra high. Here's kind of a similar story. We're more GPU dependent. The i3 holds its own all the way up till you get to the 4090. But then, interestingly again, you do see benefits going to the i9, but what's different here is that there's margin of error between the i3 and i5. But then we see benefits with the i7 and i9. All right, and on to the 4K results, and definitely less to talk about once you get up to this resolution. Even at the ultra low settings here, it's looking like where we ended the 1440p results. The i3 is sufficient until you get to the 4090. The 4090 gets benefits up to 13600K. After that, no benefit. Jump up to the lows, and we see same thing, but now we see some benefit to an i7. i9, no, but i7, yes. Go up to medium, we're back down to really just the i5, 13600K is enough. Jumping up to high, might be margin of error here. They're pretty close, but there were a few more frames seen on the i7 and i9. And then lastly, we have the ultra high, same story here. Only the 4090 needs any more than the i3. And when you get to the i7, that's the most you're going to get. Don't see a benefit from the i9. All right, so that's it for this one. I'd say in summary, 1080p, 1440p, we saw a fair amount of CPU bottlenecking at the medium settings or below. And at 4K, there was very little CPU bottlenecking. What there was, it only impacted the 4090. But been running Forza Motorsport benchmarks, and hopefully we'll have that video up much quicker than this one. And I'm also thinking about with the resolutions, I've been increasing everything at the 16:9 aspect ratio, but it's a different effect if you keep the same vertical resolution but go to the ultra wide screens, because now it's not what objects are on the screen aren't any more detailed, but you've now added more objects to the screen, so that can have a different effect. So I think I might do a video looking at how does the bottleneck change when you go from the normal aspect ratio to an ultra wide. So thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.